Hello everyone, my name is David Hernandez and I'm with the Beyond the Spectrum campaign here at Da Vinci Design High School. Today's topic of discussion will be about gender identity. We will discuss today the differences between gender identity and sexual orientation, the different gender identities in our society, and lastly, practicing tolerance to make our world a better and more safe place. The first step is understanding the basics, such as the transgender individual telling the person that their anatomy does not correlate with their identity within and how they truly feel with themselves. It is also important to note the definition of gender identity itself. Gender identity is the innermost concept of oneself as male, female, a blend, or neither, or anything in between. It is how the person sees themselves and how they refer to themselves. One's gender identity can be the same or different as the sex that they were assigned with at birth. Many people actually confuse gender identity and sexual orientation as the same thing or neither, or they don't really care about what exactly both of them are, so they often just put them to a category and ignore them altogether. Gender identity is how you see yourself and how you feel within. It has nothing to do with genitalia or your sexual preference or who you're into. It has nothing to do with sexual orientation. Sexual orientation is something different, which you guys can see in our sexual orientation video. It's also important to note that it's how one would like to be referred as well. Sexual orientation, however, is who you are attracted to and who you have romantic or sexual feelings towards. Society has a practice of ignoring the differences between the two, along with the different identities within the gender spectrum. Many people actually believe that there's only two genders, male and female, but a lot of people don't know that there's so many more on the gender spectrum that aren't really well known. And I'm here to teach you about all the different genders. The first one is cisgender, and cisgender is basically most people in the world. It's someone who identifies with their sex, with their biological sex, whatever genitalia they have. They're okay with identifying as male if they were assigned male at birth, and they don't necessarily feel trans. Cisgender is actually the one gender that is the most accepted in any everyday society. It's the one that more people are willing to see as quote unquote normal or not different or anything like that. And with this approval of cisgender individuals in everyday life comes privilege. Society tends to treat cisgender people as the superior ones. Example of this privilege are those who are cisgendered are less often bullied or harassed at school or in public. Considering that they are seen as normal, they are treated less harshly than those who are transgender, which is basically everyone else who is not cisgender. Additionally, cisgender people are less likely to face pressure due to the fact that their gender expression isn't necessarily something that's not normal. It's vital to keep in mind of your privileges and how it affects those around you and make sure that you're not using your privileges in order to exploit or harass somebody else. Knowing your privilege will actually get rid of the ignorance within yourself and with the rest of society. One that you mainly hear about is transgender, and transgender is the one that it's kind of an umbrella term, but then it's its own identity as well. The reason why it's an umbrella term is trans describes every other gender that's not cisgender. So you could be agender and trans. You could be non-binary and trans. Trans is encompassing all these different genders, and it just means that you don't identify with your original sex assigned at birth. Although transgender means that you could be transitioning from male to female or female to male, and that's the gender that you specifically hear in everyday society. You hear about transgender individuals transitioning and getting top surgery and going on hormones, and there's a lot of trans activists and actors and public figures out there that are trying to strive for change. The next one is agender. Agender is the identity when a person does not feel connected to any sort of gender or does not have a good connection with a gender or multiple genders. The prefix a means lack thereof, meaning that there's a lack thereof of gender. So, agender is also known as gender blank, gender free, or genderless. Also, there's bigender. Bigender is the identity when a person feels attached to two different genders at the exact same time. They tend to fluctuate between masculine and feminine gender typed behavior and sometimes non binary behavior. Non binary meaning that there is not a connection towards male or female, that they don't identify within the binary of male and female. Along with bigender comes trigender, polygender, and pangender. Trigender individuals tend to identify with three different genders at once. Most of the time, it's male, female, or non binary. It tends to fluctuate just as bigender, and the same thing with polygender. They tend to identify with genders that are outside of the spectrum or outside of the binary or anything like that, but it's multiple genders at once, hence the prefix poly. Another one is gender fluid. Gender fluid individuals tend to feel as though they don't belong with a certain gender, or they tend to belong to a couple of genders and fluctuate between them. But usually, most of the time, it's not two at the same time as bigender. Usually, it's like off and on, or they tend to not want to identify within the spectrum. Those who are gender fluid have a shifting identity, meaning that they don't feel with a specific gender at a certain time, rather, their gender is discontinuous. One moment, the individual may feel as though they are a woman and they identify with being female, but then 2 months later, they could identify with a man, and it tends to fluctuate very fluidly, hence the name gender fluid. And lastly, there's pangender or omnigender, those who identify with all the genders in the gender spectrum. They identify with male, female, agender, non binary, they identify with all of them. Gender identity is actually composed of three different things: biological sex, gender identity, and gender expression. You could have a penis and identify as female, but dress as a male stereotypically with your button up shirts and your suits and everything like that. You could identify with that sex or that gender, but have a different biological sex and dress a certain way. Typically, with drag queens or cross dressers, they often dress in women's clothing, but a lot of them do feel male and are comfortable to say that they are male, even though they go out every night and perform as women. It's really important to know that gender identity is not a set thing, and it can fluctuate very easily, and people can identify with something but behave or dress a certain way that doesn't necessarily correlate to what they're feeling within. There's a wide range of genders, not only limited to these discussed in this video, but with this knowledge of some of the genders that we talked about, it's very important that we accept them into our community, and it's not very exclusive from trans individuals. We need to be tolerant when meeting these trans individuals. The first thing about learning how to respect a trans individual is learning their pronouns that they are comfortable being addressed as. So he, him, his, or she, her, or they, them, and she is very much a female pronoun, but it could be used for any gender, such as agender or bigender. It's completely up to the person of what they're comfortable being addressed as. So for he and him and his, it's the exact same thing, but there's they and them, which is more of a gender neutral pronoun, and they them is more so about having this blank slate of gender, and it's commonly used with your not talked about gender identities, such as non binary or agender. And it's really important to note that they exist and to acknowledge them and to be respectful enough to address somebody using their preferred pronouns. The second thing about respecting a transgender individual is learning to speak up when a trans individual is being harassed or harmed in any sort of manner in a public space. It's really important that they are safe and they feel that they can walk across the street and not get any comments or derogatory language thrown at them. And we'll be going over another derogatory language video in the future too, as well. And finally, the third step is to keep your mind open and educate yourself and others around you about all these different identities that you've learned in this video, because it's important to know that through exposure comes acceptance and equality for all. Just remember these three things, and I know you guys can make a difference in our world. Thank you guys for watching this week, and we'll hope to see you soon. Bye!